Hello, my name is Melissa Saavedra. I will be discussing my critique on the article of Trajections of Depression and Anxiety in Latin Breast Cancer Survivors. The problem statement is this study was conducted in order to find a pattern between depression and anxiety in Latin women that are breast cancer survivors. The gaps in the literature. The gap in this study was the population of Latin breast cancer survivors in the United States and the rest of Latin breast cancer survivors in the rest of the world that weren't included in this study. Purpose statement: the trajectories of depression and anxiety in Latin women that have survived breast cancer. Tentative research approach/design, deductive research approach. Type of study: this was a longitudinal study. Procedures was experimental. Observation: in this study, depression and anxiety levels are measured from Latin breast cancer survivors after an 8-week period and a 16-week period of the study. A group-based growth mixture was used in order to distinguish the trajectories of depression and anxiety in each subgroup. The multinomial logistics regression models were used to identify predictors of trajectory-based subgroups. The PICO questions was, will depression and anxiety increase after treatment for breast cancer in Latin women? Will the 8-week psychological interventions and telephone intrapersonal counseling interventions help lower the rates of depression and anxiety in subgroups of women? In this study, evidence states that Latin breast cancer survivors have reported a greater number of cancer-related symptoms that can result in lower quality of life. The range of depression is estimated between 32% to 36% among Latin breast cancer survivors. The hypothesis questions. The null one is Latin breast cancer survivors are not at risk for depression and anxiety after diagnosis or after treatment. Alternative: Latin breast cancer survivors are at an elevated risk for developing depression and anxiety after diagnosis or after treatment. Testing the hypothesis to last data. Data was collected by telephone at the time of the trial enrollment, immediately after an 8-week intervention, and 16 weeks follow-up. Participants had choice of completing these measures in English or in Spanish. The results: 3 trajectories developed for depression: low, moderate, stable at a 78%, high improving at a 7%, and high stable at a 15%. 3 trajectories developed for anxiety: low, stable at a 73%, high improving at an 18%, high worsening at a 9%. Each subgroup was divided by the type of chemotherapy that they were receiving, different age groups, and if they were receiving social support or not. And for anxiety, demographics or clinical factors were associated with the final trajectories, and each one had different initial scores. For the conclusion, with the information gathered from the study, there should be more interventions when a Latin breast cancer survivor has been screened for high levels of depression and anxiety, in order to prevent seriously bad outcomes, and there needs to be a study to determine if anything related to these treatments influence these outcomes, especially in Latin women. The population was Latin breast cancer survivors in the United States of America. The sample was 293 Latin women receiving chemotherapy, hormonal therapy, and targeted therapy for breast cancer with or without radiation therapy. Also, their designated informal cancer givers were part of the study. In the independent variable, the high levels of depression and anxiety in breast cancer survivors. The dependent variable is the depression levels and anxiety levels in Latin breast cancer survivors. Bias in the research was the participants can withhold certain information or lie about the way that they're feeling, their emotions, making the data unreliable. Also, the way the information was being gathered through the phone, being ordinal, can also lead to the participants being biased. Levels of measurement were quantitative and nominal. Sampling procedure: in the study, the sample was taken from a previous study of Latin breast cancer survivors to determine if distinct longitudinal trajectories of depression and anxiety exist in this population. The study was conducted in its own collection of data through the phone to collect additional information. The data analysis used to conduct the study was a General Symptom Distress Scale, GSDS. 2 interventions were conducted in this study, 293 Latin women receiving chemotherapy, hormonal therapy, or targeted therapy for breast cancer, with or without radiation therapy, and their designated informal caregivers were recruited for participation in 3 randomized controlled trials, RCTs. Each RCT provided 8-week psychological interventions designed to improve QOL, which is quality of life, telephone interpersonal counseling interventions versus telephone health education. The researcher found 3 trajectories emerged from depression: low, moderate, stable, high improving, and high stable, and 3 trajectories for anxiety, which were low stable, high improving, and high worsening. Protection of human rights. All the possible safety measures were taken into consideration in order to protect the human rights and the vulnerability that these women have after their prospective treatments. They were asked to consent in order to participate into the study, and the study was approved by the Board of Education in the University of Arizona, which is where this study was taking place. The prospective budget, there was no mention of any prospective budget throughout the entirety of the study. What I can say is that the study may have been funded by the university. The references for this study, there were 47 confirmed references, which were sourced from the authors to improve their research. Their sources dated from various years, but mainly ranging from 1997 to 2019, most of them from the last 5 years in APA style. My metacognitive reflection, the reason I chose this to critique this article is because I wanted to learn more information about the different types of levels of depression and anxiety that Latin women go through after or during their treatment of breast cancer, and we have to find different ways to better their lifestyles or to decrease these levels. And that's it.